A 5-year-old boy is playing in the street with his little sister. It's Philadelphia in the late 1930s. A car clips the boy's leg. He's carried inside crying, an X-ray gets taken, and the fracture is set. This is about as ordinary an injury as childhood produces, except this fracture didn't behave like that. It turned out to be the first domino in a process that would spend the next 35 years sealing this boy's joints shut, one at a time, until doctors examining his remains would describe him as having grown an entire second skeleton, fused directly onto the one he was born with. His name was Harry Eastlack, and his body would become one of the most important skeletons in the world. This is Mendel science. Part 1. The detail nobody could read yet. Harry Raymond Eastlack was born in Philadelphia in November 1933, the son of a railroad engine man and a housewife who'd had him relatively late in life, at 41. His birth certificate is almost aggressively unremarkable. Healthy baby boy, born 10:24 in the morning at the Women's Hospital of Philadelphia. There was exactly one odd detail, and it was easy to miss. Harry's big toes were short and slightly bent, not dramatic. Not the kind of thing flagged in a newborn exam, just a small anatomical quirk. Decades later, doctors would recognize that exact detail as one of the earliest and most reliable physical signs of the disease already written into Harry's genetic code. But in 1933, nobody could have made that connection because the connection didn't exist in medicine yet. So the toes were noted and forgotten, and Harry went home looking, to every observer, like a perfectly healthy baby. For 5 years, that held up. Then came the accident. Part 2, the worst possible response. After the car struck his leg, the fracture healed the way fractures do. But in the weeks that followed, something else started happening. Hard lumps began rising in the soft tissue near the injury. Not bruising that fades, but firm masses that kept growing and didn't stop. The doctors did the responsible thing. Faced with an unexplained mass under a child's skin, they biopsied it, cutting in to remove a sample so they could examine it under a microscope and figure out what they were dealing with. Because Harry had a condition in which cutting into an unexplained lump is close to the worst possible move you can make. That mass wasn't a tumor, and it wasn't an infection. It was new bone, actively forming inside his soft tissue. And whatever was building it wasn't something a biopsy could remove, because it was written into every cell in his body. So the surgery didn't diagnose the problem, it fed it. The incision itself was a fresh injury, and fresh injury was exactly what the disease needed to trigger its next bigger flare-up. Nobody in the late 1930s could have known that. The actual mechanism wouldn't be identified for almost 70 more years. But the same mistake would repeat across the rest of Harry's life. Doctors kept finding growths, kept operating to investigate or remove them, and each time, without anyone realizing it, handed the disease a brand new trigger. By the time it was over, Harry had gone through 11 separate operations. Nearly all of them, in hindsight, did far more harm than good. Part 3. What was actually happening inside him. The disease was fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva, FOP. It's one of the rarest conditions in all of medicine, appearing in roughly 1 out of every 2 million people. Fewer than 1,000 people in the US, and under 2,000 worldwide, are thought to have it today. Harry went his entire life without ever meeting a single one of them. Here's the mechanism. Everyone's body has a repair system for soft tissue. Pull a muscle, bruise yourself, tear something, and specialized stem cells move in to patch the damage, normally with soft, flexible scar tissue. In someone with FOP, a single gene involved in that repair process, called ACVR1, carries one tiny typo in its code. That typo leaves the receptor that those repair cells depend on being stuck, slightly switched on, and hypersensitive to almost any kind of tissue damage. So when the repair crew arrives, they don't lay down scar tissue. They lay down bone, real, solid, permanent bone, built directly inside muscle, tendon, and connective tissue, one flare-up at a time. It doesn't take a car accident to set it off. A hard bruise, an injection in the wrong muscle, routine dental work, even a bad fall down a few stairs can trigger a new wave. And critically, any operation meant to cut the extra bone back out sets off the exact same response, often rebuilding more bone than was removed in the first place. That's precisely what had been happening to Harry, operation after operation, without a single doctor understanding why. The mutation behind FOP wasn't actually identified until 2006, 33 years after Harry died. For every day of his life, this was happening to him with no explanation attached to it at all. Part 4. A childhood lived around the disease. Piece by piece, the new bone spread. It formed in broad sheets across Harry's back. It bridged rib to rib. It fused his spine to the base of his skull and his skull to his jaw. One joint at a time, shoulders, elbows, hips, knees. Motion simply stopped being an option. And yet, by every account that survives him, Harry had a genuinely happy childhood. He was a devoted reader. He loved the radio and his record collection. He played cards for hours at a stretch. He went to the movies constantly enough that he had an unofficial reserved seat at the Hamilton Theater in Philadelphia. 7th row, center, the one spot where he could stretch out the leg that no longer bent. The staff there all knew that seat was his. His mother, Helen, held most of that world together. She'd had Harry at 41, and now, as he grew into adolescence, she was the one caring for him day to day, baking for him, walking him to and from school every single day, in every kind of weather, for years. His father worked the railroad and supported the household, but it was Helen who made sure Harry's daily life still felt, as much as it possibly could, like an ordinary one. Part 5. When the skeleton becomes the cage. As Harry entered adulthood, the flares kept coming, and the fusion kept advancing. Eventually, his own arms became locked against his ribcage by new bridges of bone. He could still stand with assistance and shuffle short distances using a cane, but the basic tasks of daily life, dressing, feeding himself, simply moving from room to room, increasingly required someone else's hands. Eventually, his needs outpaced what his mother could manage at home, and Harry moved into a Philadelphia care facility called Inglis House. He lived out the last 20 years of his life there. He died in November 1973 from pneumonia, 6 days before what would have been his 40th birthday. That specific cause of death isn't incidental. As FOP fuses the ribs and spine into one increasingly rigid shell, the chest wall gradually loses its ability to expand. Breathing gets shallower year after year, and the lungs become steadily less able to clear themselves, which makes respiratory infections both more likely and more dangerous. It remains today one of the leading causes of early death in people with FOP. Part 6. The decision. At some point before he died, Harry told his sister, Helene, exactly what he wanted done with his body. He wanted it donated to medicine. Specifically, he wanted his skeleton preserved and put on public display, so scientists could keep studying it, and maybe eventually find the answer nobody had ever been able to give him. His skeleton went to the Mütter Museum at the College of Physicians of Philadelphia, where it still stands today, the only fully articulated skeleton of a person with FOP anywhere in the world. Normally, a museum skeleton has to be wired together by hand, joint by joint, because the soft tissue that once held the bones in place has long since decomposed. Harry's skeleton needed none of that. His disease had already done the wiring, permanently. Almost the entire structure is fused into one continuous piece, skull welded to spine welded to jaw, arms bridged solid to the ribcage, spurs of bone jutting from the pelvis and thighs. Standing in its case, it is, quite literally, two skeletons merged into one, the ordinary skeleton he was born with, and the second one his body built directly on top of it, over 35 years, one flare at a time. Part 7. What the gift actually bought. For decades afterward, Harry's skeleton sat at the physical center of FOP research. Physicians studying the disease traveled to Philadelphia just to see it in person and check their theories against something real. In the 1990s and 2000s, his skeleton was even lent out to international FOP research meetings, where scientists who'd spent entire careers on this disease finally stood in front of the one case where its full progression had been written out, joint by joint, in bone. When the gene behind FOP was finally identified in 2006, researchers went back to Harry's skeleton to hold that discovery up against the very structure it was supposed to explain. His sister Helene, a music teacher, returned to visit that skeleton every year for the rest of her life. She later said that in his final days, Harry told her he hoped it would end up helping someone else avoid what had happened to him. It's a strange kind of legacy. The man who never once met another person with his own disease became the reason thousands of people with it now belong to an actual community, with doctors who recognize the toes on sight instead of reaching for a biopsy needle. There's still no cure for FOP, but there's real, tangible progress now that didn't exist during Harry's lifetime. In 2023, the FDA approved the first drug ever specifically indicated for FOP, palovarotene, sold as Sohonos, shown to reduce the volume of new abnormal bone forming during a flare-up. It isn't a cure, and other approaches, including gene-targeted therapies, are still working their way through trials. But for a disease medicine could, for most of its history, only watch happen, it's the first real foothold against it. Conclusion. Almost everyone jokes about having a skeleton in the closet, some secret they'd rather keep buried. Harry Eastlack actually had two, and neither one was a secret. Because he made absolutely sure of that himself, he chose to put both of them behind glass, in full public view, so that the worst thing that ever happened to him could become the reason it happens a little less to somebody else. This is Mendel Science. When the body is a mystery, read the genes. Subscribe and like for more genetic mysteries.